remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The identity of the sea peoples the Egyptians expelled from Egypt in the reign of Ramses III was the Greeks. This can be seen if we read the inscription of Ramses III, which can be shown to corroborate the events which ancient Greek historians say occurred after the Trojan War. The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before their arms, from Hatti, Kode, Karchemish, Arzawa, and Alishion, being cut off. A camp was set up in one place, Amaru. They desolated its people, and its land was like that which had never come into being. They were coming forward toward Egypt, while the flame was prepared before them. Their confederation was the Peliset, Tjeka, Skiklesh, Danayan, and Weshesh, lands united. They laid their hands upon the land as far as the circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting, our plans will succeed. The Peliset were also known as the Philistines, who archaeologists have shown were Mycenaean Greeks. These people were therefore Pelasgian Greeks. The Pelasgian tribes of Greece included the Arcadians and the Athenians. According to Greek historians, after the Trojan War, the Arcadian king Agapna and the Athenian king Demophon both migrated to Cyprus. Since the play Helen by Euripides dates to 405 BC, and the version of the story given by Herodotus dates to 460 BC, and this is the most recent attempt to mythologize Greco-Egyptian history, and the Bible is less consistent with the truth than the Helen story, the Old Testament must have been written and mythologized at a much later date. The Bible makes out that the Hebrews and Israelites are the same people when in fact they are different peoples. The Greek histories mention all the peoples who invaded Egypt with Menelaus after the Trojan War correctly, all of whom were Greeks, thus the Greeks are clearly relating their own history. So now we know the basis of the Exodus story. It is clear that the Bible was created by joining together past historical events in a semi-mythical narrative, and this semi-mythical narrative eventually formed the basis of the Jewish religion. So now we know the basis of the Exodus story. It is clear that the Bible was created by joining together past historical events in a semi-mythical narrative, and this semi-mythical narrative eventually formed the basis of the Jewish religion. The so-called Canaanites, Phoenicians, are also thought to be of European ancestry, and carry the DNA marker of one of the so-called 7 daughters of Eve, called Jasmine. So yet again these people, which the Bible implies were the ancestors of the biblical Jews, cannot possibly be the biological ancestors of the Jews of today. The Minoan eruption of Thera, also referred to as the Thera eruption, was a major catastrophic volcanic eruption with a volcanic explosivity index of 6 or 7. Dated to the mid-2nd millennium BC, the eruption was one of the largest volcanic events on Earth in recorded history. It devastated the island of Thera, now called Santorini, including the Minoan settlement at Akrotiri and communities and agricultural areas on nearby islands and the coast of Crete, with a related earthquake and tsunami. There are no clear ancient records of the eruption, which may have inspired certain Greek myths, caused turmoil in Egypt, and been alluded to in a Chinese chronicle. The exact date of the eruption is disputed. The only gold object found at the excavation of Akrotiri, a small sculpture of an ibex that was hidden under a floor, a thorough evacuation in advance of the catastrophe, must have occurred since few artifacts, and no corpses were buried in the ash. The eruption of Thera and volcanic fallout may have inspired the myths of the Titanomachy, in Hesiod's Theogony. The Titanomachy could have picked up elements of Western Anatolian folk memory, as the tale spread westward. Hesiod's lines have been compared with volcanic activity, citing Zeus's thunderbolts as volcanic lightning, the boiling earth and sea as a breach of the magma chamber, immense flame and heat as evidence of freatic explosions, among many other descriptions. In Greek mythology, the Titanomachy was a 10-year series of battles fought in Thessaly, consisting of most of the Titans, an older generation of gods, based on Mount Othrys, fighting against the Olympians, the younger generations, who would come to reign on Mount Olympus, and their allies. This event is also known as the War of the Titans, Battle of the Titans, Battle of the Gods, or just the Titan War. The war was fought to decide which generation of gods would have dominion over the universe. It ended in victory for the Olympian gods. A supervolcano's technical definition is a volcano that has a volcanic explosivity index of 7 or 8. A supervolcano also has to throw out more than 200 cubic kilometers of material. Mount St. Helens threw out 1.2 cubic kilometers. Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980 was about 400 megaton in power. The largest nuclear bomb ever detonated was around 50 megaton, and Mount St. Helens was not a supervolcano. This map is a part of the Atlas of Chernobyl pollution. Certain parts of Greece, together with southern Germany, the Salzburg area of Austria, northern Italy, and extended regions of the Scandinavian peninsula, are amongst the EU regions mostly contaminated after the Chernobyl nuclear accident. Other European countries with similar levels of contamination are Romania, Slovenia, Croatia and Bulgaria. The ground contamination was determined not only by the integrated concentrations of artificial radionuclides in air, but also by the rainfalls during the presence of the radioactive cloud. The heavy rainfalls in Western Macedonia and Thessalia during 1986 resulted in higher contamination of these regions as compared to Thrace, which is closer to Chernobyl. Nostradamus quatrain 816. At the place where Hiram, Jason, had his ship built, there will be such a great sudden flood, that there will be no land to attack. The wave climbs Thessalian, Thessalian, Olympic, Mount Olympus, Greece. Democritus, ancient Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, remembered today for his formulation of an atomic theory of the universe. He proposed that all matter was composed of small indivisible particles called atoms. If we open up the latter part of the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, we read the intriguing account of the Israelite prince named Joseph, captured and sold as a slave in Egypt. In short, through a series of crazy events, he rises in power until he is also a prince of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh himself. Then Joseph has a dream warning him of impending famine. So for 7 years, he stockpiles every spare bit of grain and food available in Egypt. Then? Disaster. A famine hits the entire ancient world, that lasts for 7 years, and Egypt survives, as does likely the entire human race due to Prince Joseph's foresight. The description of this famine fits modern scenarios and projections of a nuclear winter following a global, all-out nuclear war, that is projected by modern meteorologists and war planners to last between 5 and 10 years. Read about it yourself in Genesis chapter 41. Twice towards the end of the chapter, it mentions the severity of the famine in relation to the entire world, and in looking at the original Hebrew text, it does indeed refer to the inhabitants of the entire earth, not just the Middle East. So let's go to another source of ancient written history. The history of India, as recorded in the Mahabharata, a land east of Israel. And I quote, directly from the manuscripts themselves, using flying machines called vimanas that were used to launch powerful weapons of destruction, the Mahabharata records that someone brought death to the people. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible heat of this weapon. Elephants burst into flames and ran to and fro in a frenzy, seeking a protection from Thera. Over a vast area other animals crumpled to the ground and died. The waters boiled, and the creatures residing therein also died. From all points of the compass the arrows of the flame rained continuously. This destruction was caused by a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. Elsewhere we read, an incandescent column of smoke and fire, as brilliant as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. It was the unknown weapon, the iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death. Continuing on, the corpses were so burnt that they were no longer recognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without cause. Birds, disturbed, circled in the air and were turned white. Foodstuffs were poisoned. Does this sound suspiciously like nuclear weapons to you too? Approximate date of this manuscript? Between 2000 BC and 3000 BC. The legends of Atlantis pretty much all refer to a very technologically advanced civilization with air flight capabilities that disappeared beneath the sea in a single cataclysmic event. Some of the best modern research into the legends verify that the civilization likely did indeed exist, and that it was destroyed, presumably by a volcanic eruption, explosion like in Pompeii's destruction, or a nuclear explosion. The trouble is that they're not sure which volcano. Best estimate of a date for the disappearance of Atlantis? Roughly 2000 BC. The legends of Lemuria. Legends of Lemuria are even more spotty than those of Atlantis. But in brief, they were also supposedly very technologically advanced, and then disappeared suddenly. Then you have the Greek legends of the war collectively referred to as the Clash of the Titans. And while the specific details may have become shrouded in myth, the point remains, they agree that there was an incredibly destructive war fought between very advanced civilizations. Deep in the heart of Siberia, lies a strange valley where the locals fear to tread, because people that go there have a tendency to not come home. Indeed, even some modern explorers have fallen strangely and gravely ill when exploring this area, near Tunguska, site of an unexplained, massive, nuclear bomb-sized explosion about 100 years ago, long before World War II. The locals understandably call it the Valley of Death. But the weird part is that the locals also have legends associated with the valley. They include details of an ancient war fought between highly advanced races, using huge weapons located here that apparently were capable of shooting down threats from the air. Are you starting to understand that our human history does have record of this war? And does it also make more sense now why we have so little recorded human history prior to roughly 2000 BC? Of course, when the Romans burned the Library of Alexandria, we lost what little we had. When asked by a newspaper reporter about the first atomic explosion, Robert Oppenheimer, widely considered to be the father of the atomic bomb, apparently answered with something cryptic about the explosion being the first one in modern times. He is also widely noted to have quoted Indian history while watching his first nuclear explosion, "I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds." Frederick Soddy, a well-known physicist from around the turn of the last century, said this in 1909. "I believe that there have been civilizations in the past that were familiar with atomic energy, and that by misusing it they were totally destroyed."
I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."